I on? Hello, everyone. I'm Menopause Campbell, founder of Cheemia and author of The Omni Advantage. Welcome to another episode of LinkedIn Live Digital Transformation Series. I'm genuinely delighted you're here with me. Today, I'm joining in from Knoxville, Tennessee, and please do drop a quick hello in the chat and let me know where you're tuning in from. At Cheemia, our purpose is very, very simple. Is to unleash human potential to create a healthier world. And a big part of that is helping healthcare leaders create more meaningful engagement through better leadership, communication, and digital transformation. Over the last 4 years, these digital transformation conversations have been about challenging thinking, sharing experiences, and exploring how we can engage healthcare professionals in a way that really genuinely add value to them. And that's exactly why I'm delighted to welcome today's guest, Tina Backhouse. Tina, it's really great pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Menez. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Super. And before we dive into the conversation, let me properly introduce you to everyone who's listening or watching this. Tina spent more than 25 years in senior leadership across the pharmaceutical industry, launching innovative medicines and leading teams across Europe. But what really distinguishes Tina is the impact she's had beyond commercial leadership. She's become one of the UK's most influential voices in women's health, championing for better policy, greater equity of access and improved care for women. And as a member of the government's Menopause Advisory Group, vice chair of Menopause Mandate, and now an ambassador for well-being of women, Tina has really helped shape national conversations and influence real policy change. So I'm really delighted you joining us today to share your experience and Tina's experience, leadership journey, and her vision for women's health is really, really inspiring. So thank you, Tina, and welcome.
No, you're very welcome. I love talking about this subject, so it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you.
Amazing. You know, Tina, I often ask this from our amazing guest. Do you remember how you and I met?
Yeah, so I think so I know it was at Pfizer because we were both at Pfizer. I can't remember when, but I remember I was in one of the southern regional offices and you were in the northern office in Scotland. I think you were doing regional marketing at that time, I think. So
That's right, yeah.
But apart, and I remember perhaps talking about certain campaigns with you, but that's, I mean, when we worked at Pfizer, and I mean, the great thing about Pfizer, there were so many people that your network is huge, right? Because so many people you meet say, oh, we worked together at Pfizer. Now, some of them, it's difficult to remember. And but I definitely remember that's where we met and worked together, yes. But I can't remember when that was.
We had a regional office, and ours was probably one of the smaller regional offices.
Yes.
As ours was for Scotland and Northern Ireland.
In Edinburgh,
but I remember there were maybe about 200 people working for that region, or maybe 120. And I remember when we had national sales conferences, or even we had a marketing conference. I remember I went to the marketing conference. There were like about 200 people just in the marketing.
No, I know. There was 120 first line managers. You know,
that's
so you
crazy,
go to a
right?
manager briefing and it'd be like a conference. So it was crazy, right? And it was such a growth time, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
You came from, did you not come from Park Davis when
we
merged? Right, so when we merged to Park Davis.
I did. And I tell you, Tina, it was really weird because in Park Davis, we had the regional structure. We decentralized. So all the central marketing budget was devolved to the region. Park Davis went a step further than Pfizer. So we went through the merger with Pfizer, and everybody in the leadership team who was working with me, apart from the first line managers, but the first line managers were not working in the office. They all kind of left. They took redundancy and left the organization. And I was left there on my own. So weird thing was, Pfizer had a regional office in the same building, but just like in a different section of the building. It was like one of these multi-story buildings, and our office was quite tiny, and they were there. And I was like, you know, when you're so busy, like so much is happening, your inbox is like pulsing that you need to answer it. And then when we're going through merger, it was just like nothing, no emails. It was like tumbleweed. And I'm sitting in this office on my own, like thinking, what do I do now? And then I was so happy when the merger kind of went through, because then we got
Yeah,
so
people
busy.
to work with. Yeah, so that's
Yeah,
nice.
went from like tumbleweed to trying to manage 9 brands between Cheryl and I, because Cheryl was the other marketeer based in
Yes,
Scotland. So it was fun. I really enjoyed that time, but
good.
it's
Me
nice to
too.
reminisce. Yeah. So now, Tina, I've got lots of questions for you. But this is not just about you and I having a conversation. This is a live conversation, and it becomes a lot more powerful when we shape it with the questions and voices of people who are listening to this conversation. So I want to ask you who's watching. So do say something, drop a comment in the chat, put your questions in. If Tina says something you like it, please give it a thumbs up. If you see something from a different perspective and you want to challenge us, please do respectfully. We would love it, because debate is really healthy. And I think when we discuss things, that diverse perspective help us think better, think broader. So please do join us, and I really genuinely love to hear from you. I just have a quick chat to see, has anybody joined the conversation yet? No, we've not had any questions yet, but please do come in. So I'm going to kick off, but what I want to emphasize is Tina is representing her own views here. So Tina, feel free to talk freely, but please don't mention any brands by name,
No.
because our code of practice and so on. You know, I'm going to start by asking you this. I love your background, and I guess that's another thing you and I share. But how did a psychiatric nurse become one of the UK's leading voices in women's health? Tell me your story.
I think, like all of us, you know, I'd like to say it was all well planned, but I don't think that's how people really end up in pharma. So I was a psychiatric nurse, which I did really love. But in retrospect, I was very young, and you're obviously dealing with things that, you know, are very tough and kind of make you, you know, teach you certain things about life. And I was probably too young to think that I would do it forever, because it was so hard. And then I met somebody who, and I can't remember, I think it was probably a party or so. I met somebody who worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and they said, oh, why don't you join the pharmaceutical industry? And, you know, when you've worked in the NHS and someone says to you, oh, join the industry and you get a car and you get a bonus, and I mean, it just seems wild, right? So
Yeah.
so I was like, my God, this is incredible. As opposed to the NHS where you have to take your own tea and coffee in. And I joined as a GP rep, initially working for Bristol Myers Squibb, who had just gone through their merger. So they had just joined Bristol Myers and Squibb. So they were going through their own transition. And then I was there probably about 18 months to 2 years, and kind of worked my way up, did my ABPI when you still had to go to London and sit, you know, and use the pencil and colour the right answers. And I then was out one day. I'd become a hospital rep, and I was out one day in a hospital, and I bumped into a rep from Pfizer who was out with his manager, and it was when Pfizer were going through their massive growth spurt. They'd just taken on Lipitor, and so they had a lot of products coming out at the same time in the 90s. And he said to me, oh, why don't you join Pfizer? Obviously, because he was probably going to get paid to recruit people as well, so which we all know now. But it seemed like a really good idea, and I did. I joined Pfizer, and I worked my way up through the ranks in Pfizer. I did a trainer's job, area manager, regional manager, national sales manager, speciality, sales operations manager, marketing jobs. So I did a lot of roles at Pfizer, and eventually left Pfizer, went to work in various different companies, smaller companies, because I think once you worked in one big company, I didn't necessarily want to go and work in another big company. I wanted to work in smaller companies where you could make more difference, and worked at Almirall, for example, who were just setting up the respiratory business in the UK, and that was a startup, which was a lot of fun. I really liked doing that, taking it from nothing and building teams and doing that. And then eventually, at the end of 2019, I took redundancy. And I wasn't really sure about what I wanted to do next, because actually now I know, although I didn't know at the time, I was kind of quite burnt out with my own menopause, which wasn't being properly diagnosed, and I wasn't getting any help for. I lost a lot of confidence. I had a lot of anxiety problems, and I didn't really feel like I was in the right position to get a job. It's quite hard to get a job when you're feeling like that. And eventually, and that was in the November, and in the January, someone said to me, "There's this company called Theramex, and they're starting a women's health business, and you'd be great at it." And everyone was saying, "Oh, you should go." And I went and I met them. I first of all I met the CEO online on the Friday afternoon. On the Monday, I went into the office in Sloane Square on the Monday morning, met our head of HR and various other people, and then started on the Wednesday morning. And but I was initially only going to go for as an interim for a few months, because I didn't know if I could really commit to a full-time job. And but and to set the business up, to set the menopause business up, because we had acquired menopause products, and to set the UK business up, because at that time the UK business for Theramex was worth about $1 million. It was very small, and they were looking for someone to kind of build it and launch the products. Then we went into lockdown, and the world became crazy, and there was HRT shortages, and to cut a very long story short, I just felt that this was where I was meant to be, and that women's health, I'd been kind of led to women's health. It became a real passion of mine, and still a massive passion of mine, and it was really what I wanted to do. So I stayed then for 6 years, doing all of that and getting massively involved in women's health, wider than the company. And yeah, so that's how I got to be in women's health, I guess.
Tina, it's really fascinating how menopause affected you personally, because I've never told you this. I'm going to tell you now. I always looked at you because I felt you had this aura of confidence, like you projected this confidence. So I can't even imagine you not feeling confident. But then if
No,
you
no.
know that's the person you are, and inside you're not feeling it, that must have been quite tough. And as I was reflecting and listening to your story, I think the reason you were so successful and passionate in women's health and the work you did with Theramax is probably because you've been a nurse, so you've seen it from an HCP perspective. You've been in commercial pharma, marketing, sales for years. Then going through menopause, you
Yep.
experience patient perspective. So it's like as if all the dots joined together, you could see it because once you've been a nurse, you can't stop being a nurse.
No,
You have
exactly. And also you can see the problems. If it was a problem for me, and I'm white, middle class, and live in Winchester, and
yeah.
can advocate for myself, and I still couldn't get treatment. And then the more you dive into this, that you see the massive, there's inequality with women's health generally. We know that, even though it's 51% of the population. But then within women's health, there's massive inequality issues in terms of ethnicity, in terms of social class, and where people live, and so it's really tough for some women. And and it is, my great passion and my great belief is that menopause can never just be the something that white middle class women have, and we ignore everybody else because there's no data. It's really, really important that all women are supported through their journey, and they can all make choices. I've never felt that all women should be prescribed HRT. That's not what I think at all. I think women should have choice, and they should have education about their condition. And I think that they should be entitled to see a healthcare professional who is educated about it as well, wherever you live.
And the thing is, not everybody has the same experience of menopause, but the
No,
fact that you had challenges, so makes you have empathy for other people, and it's just, you know, giving choice. That's the key thing that you said. But
Yeah,
thank you for
definitely.
sharing that. That's really insightful as well about how it affected you. You mentioned you worked for a big organization like Pfizer that was so big, and you worked for smaller companies who were probably more agile. Um, how have you seen technology change leadership and decision making during your career across these different sized organizations?
I think it's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, when I first became a rep, and you know, we used to every Friday, you know, go home and write down the Walsh number of the doctors you saw, and put your
Post it to your
paperwork. I
carbon
know
copy
there's
and
no
post it to
mailbag.
your manager.
And you had to make sure that they got it on Monday morning because that was their admin day. And so, you know, obviously there's been huge amount of, you know, of difference in terms of technology. I often think, and this might be controversial, I often think that for a very advanced industry, which pharma is, in terms of research, I often think that we haven't embraced technology quite as well as we could have. I think that there's a lot of concern, obviously, about the code and about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. I know people are starting to embrace AI in pharma, but they are far behind, I think, other industries like that. And sometimes, you know, we went last year, I think, to that to Rena Newton's conference on the code, and you know, I remember her saying sometimes the code can be an excuse for people not to do things, and it must never be an excuse. You know, we're
Yeah,
trying to do things for the benefit of patients, and you know, we all try and understand that. So I think obviously we've seen an advancement in technology. I don't think it's as much as it could have been in pharma.
yeah,
And I think we could do much more. I think digital marketing is a really good example of that. You know, people talk about omni-channel all the time like it's, you know, some, you know, weird and wonderful beast. I mean, it's very, very straightforward, omni-channel, and most people, you know, are
yeah.
experiencing omni-channel on a daily basis in their
Exactly.
life,
Yeah.
you know.
But
So
like even I find some of people say, "Oh, we don't like technology, the old good old days." And I said, like, how do you order a taxi? They said, I get an Uber. I said, where do you shop? Amazon. You know, how
exactly,
do you take your grocery? Oh, online shop at Tesco. So people are using it but not realizing it. But you're
people are
right
using it
about the.
all the time.
Mm,
Yeah. And, you know, I use it all the time. And, you know, I meet lots of people and I can't remember everything. And I like to know, you know, tell me, you know, get Claude to tell me about this person I'm about to meet. What could I speak to? My daughter goes mad, of course, because she's all about, you know, it's not very environmentally friendly and you're causing world drought by using Claude. But yeah, I do that. But I think the industry is slow on the uptake of technology and
yeah.
digital transformation. That's my view on it.
I mean, the organization invests in it, but the transformation often either succeeds or fails because of, I think, people rather than platform.
It's always because of people, and it's, you know, they will often have the best technology because they often buy the best technology, but people, and I think a lot of that is people are, you know, scared within the code. They don't understand, you know, the code itself. The ABPI hasn't really kept up, I don't think, with the digital era. And, you know, obviously part of the code beauty is it's very grey, but for some people that greyness around digital is really holding them back, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember I was working with a client and like a marketeer. I said to him, why don't you do this? He said, we can't do that from the code. And to be honest with you, they had a 36-page detail aid that was just
That was never
repetitive.
used. That was
The
never
picture
used.
on the detail aid did not represent the patient population they were trying to serve. It just like seemed like a compendium of irrelevant information. I said, why can't you do this? He said, because of the code. I said, can you tell me specifically what section of the code
Yeah,
says
exactly.
you cannot do that? And I think he didn't know, he just stumbled. And I think because they've heard someone else says, oh, we
Yeah,
can't do this because of the code. And that's what I love about Rena. She tells
Yeah,
you
me too. Yeah.
what you can do
Yeah.
within the code.
Absolutely. And, I've often, dropped her a message and said, can I just ask you a quick question? And she's come back with total clarity. And I think that's exactly what you need. And I think, it doesn't best suit customers either, because doctors want to engage
Yeah.
digitally, and it suits how they run their day-to-day lives as well. So I think, pharma need to get better at that.
Yeah. And within the organizations you were leading, have you got any lessons that help the people to embrace the technology?
I think for us, it was always, at Theramex, which is a smaller company, it was always about getting the best support and getting people like Rena in to really talk to people and to explore people's worries. Because we all know from leading sales teams in the past, you can give them the best sales aids on iPads, you can give them the best iPads, you can give them all this technology, and sometimes it never comes out of the bag. And that's because you have to do that change leadership thing before you even introduce the technology.
Yeah.
And I think, so for me, in terms of change leadership, it's always about having experts who can really support that and to answer questions and, and to deal with objections before you even introduce the technology, so that by the time you do introduce the technology, people are bought into it and they see the benefit of it. I don't think, just slapping new technology on the desk in front of people it just won't be worked. I know that myself. I'm a sucker for buying new things.
Yeah.
And, I know that about my Mac. I probably use 10% of its capacity.
Yeah.
I like it because it's a really funky color, and everyone mentions it to me all the time. But, I probably don't know how to
What
use it
color is
properly.
it?
It's like a lime green color.
Oh,
And
nice.
but the point is that, but I don't use the full capacity of it. And in
Yeah.
fact, once I had like an hour to spare, and I happened to be walking past the Apple shop in Covent Garden, and I went in, and they were running like these free consultations, and I did one about how to use, because I've always got the latest iPhone, and all the gear and no idea really, and I actually spent an hour, and they showed me how to use my phone. My God, and it was free. It was the best hour I've spent.
Amazing.
It was amazing. I'd really recommend people do that if they have Apple gadgets. Go and find out what free courses they run. It's brilliant.
Fantastic. So let's go back to the women's health topic. It's been
Yes.
now several years since women's health strategy was launched in the UK. What progress have you seen, and where do you believe the biggest gaps and inequalities still remain in the system?
So, I mean, initially, the first women's health strategy was introduced in 2022, and then it was renewed at the beginning of this year. But since 2022 until now, and obviously when Professor Dame Leslie Regan was appointed as Women's Health Ambassador, there has been 8 Secretary of States for Health in this country,
Wow.
and that is a problem, because that consistency is what is really holding us back, I think. Now, I also think in terms of the women's health strategy, it's really good in terms of what it says, and it pulls out about inequalities, and it pulls out about marginalized communities, and what we need to do there. But the problem is there's no resource around it. So that it's a strategy that's been developed by brilliant brains like Dame Leslie, like the Royal College of Gynecologists, like Wellbeing for Women, all those people. But actually, there's no resource put behind it. So what you have is people out there really desperately trying to do things differently to meet the needs of their local communities, but there's no central resource. And until the government give some central resource, that's going to be very, very challenging, I think. And so there are some brilliant things going on, but that's just because ICBs probably have prioritized women's health and given some cash, or people have, I know in Mid-Hants where I live that there's a nurse run bus that goes out and does long-acting contraception for people, and women's health from a bus. And there are women's health hubs that have been set up. Tower Hamlets is a brilliant one, where it really meets the needs of the local community. But this hasn't come from government resourcing. And I think that it will continue to be an issue until you do that. And I also think you do need consistency. I mean, we've just had another health secretary this week, and you know, it's always interesting, isn't it, that it's a business where you don't necessarily need experience to be suddenly in the most powerful position in that industry. And I'm not suggesting that Yvette Cooper doesn't have experience, because I don't know, but I think really what you need is you need somebody who really lives and breathes this stuff and really wants to make a difference across the whole of the NHS, but women's health being, over 51% of it. I think we really need to push that, and to really make sure that there is some, in the next 3 years, that there is some momentum behind the women's health strategy, because it's now all about implementation.
Yeah. So what could be done to accelerate progress, do you think?
I think there's quite a lot of things that could be done. I think obviously the biggest thing that could be done is resource could be given at local level, and also directors to, because we know that initially when the women's health strategy came out in 2022, and there was a very small amount of money given to ICBs to fund it. I mean, I think it was less than £1 per woman in the.
Wow.
We know that a lot of ICBs that just got swallowed up into their deficit, and nothing happened because of that. So this needs to be bespoke, ring-fenced funding, and it needs to be. I don't think it needs government to tell people what they need. I think it should be done on local communities as to what's needed, and I think that one of the biggest things that can be done centrally is this addressing of education. And unless we educate healthcare professionals around women's health consistently, which still, 40% of medical schools are not covering menopause in their syllabus, which is crazy. And everybody I speak to has a story about going to see a healthcare professional who told them they didn't know anything about the menopause or women's health. And that was certainly my experience. We need to ensure that there is a standard of education for healthcare professionals around women's health, not just menopause, but around, all aspects of gynecological health, from women's first periods all the way through, fertility or non-fertility, pregnancy, menopause, osteoporosis, all these areas that people are educated on, and that would make a huge difference. And then, of course, education in schools has to happen as well, and it has to be accurate. My 16-year-old daughter came home the other day and told me that they'd had a talk in school on contraception, and that the stuff they were told was wrong.
Really?
And she knew it was wrong because she'd been to a book launch by the Lowdown where they had written their book on contraception, which she had read, and it was absolutely inaccurate. And when she asked the teacher about it, the teacher just said, well, that's just what it says in the notes. So we're not even telling, we're not telling girls. I mean, certainly when we were at school, we were told nothing about our bodies. It might be whispered that you were going to get a period. I certainly wasn't told that. We certainly weren't told about menopause or anything else. So, girls have to be educated, HCPs have to be educated, and there has to be specific resource so that women can actually have a service and see specialists that can help them.
Yeah, you're right. These topics were quite taboo topics you didn't talk about. You probably talked to your friends about it, but you weren't educated. The
and
time I was
certainly,
growing up,
definitely. Our mothers' generations did not talk about menopause. And of course, in certain cultures now, they still don't do that. And, because there might not be words to describe it, or, so that's really important.
I often heard, Tina, people say, if men had menopause, they probably would have found a cure for it by now.
But that's absolutely true, isn't it? It's absolutely true that, or heavy periods, if men were getting heavy periods, and that, that's the other thing, that, that heavy periods that we accept, oh, it's just a heavy period. Well, we know that black women are much more likely to have fibroids and heavy periods than white women, and they're completely negated and just told, well, you're just black and you get heavy periods. Well, it's not normal to miss work or school because of heavy periods. So
Yeah.
and there's great resources out there, like Wellbeing of Women have their period tracker online, which can really help people. But these are all charities and groups that really done it on their own back rather than being government funded.
Yeah, I think when I was a student nurse, I had a friend. She was a GP training, and one day I come home and she was lying in bed saying, "Oh, shoot me, Marina, shoot me." I said,
Yeah.
"What's wrong?" She had the flu, and she was just so unwell. And he said, "I promised to be so much nicer to my patients. Now I realize what they're suffering." As they were coming to her practice, she was saying, "Okay, it's just a flu. Just
Just the
drink
flu, yeah.
fluids and it will go." And then when she had it herself, she was saying to me, "Shoot me, shoot
I
me."
know. Yeah,
So I
exactly,
think
exactly.
empathy brings a lot of understanding, and we should be open-minded and listen rather than judge. Um, just because we don't suffer ourselves or don't
No,
experience it doesn't
absolutely.
mean it doesn't exist and in people's head. So let's change, look ahead now. Looking over the next 5 years, what innovations, technology, or changes give you the greatest like optimism for the future of women's health?
I think I do feel optimistic about women's health, and really I feel optimistic because there's so much going on,
Mhm.
and there's so much femtech and investment, and very innovative products
And
that could,
devices as well, right?
and devices. I mean, more devices than anything, really,
Mhm.
which could make a massive difference to women's health if they were brought into the NHS and put into a proper service. I think as well, what makes me optimistic is having a women's health ambassador, having really positive big groups of very influential women who in parliament, in colleges, in societies, in groups, in charities, who really, you know, live and breathe this stuff on a daily basis. I mean, there are some people that I speak to every day about women's health, and I
Mhm.
only know them through women's health. And that's what we do. And we're constantly trying to think of ways, how can we do a pilot? How can we make this work? How can we work together to try and make a difference? I think, there is a big area that we still have to keep a lot of pressure in policy on the government. Look, we've had some good wins in terms of the HRT prescription price and, the over 40 health check. But since the government said that they would include menopause in the over 40 health check last October, again, we've had 3 Secretary of States for health, and that
Mhm.
hasn't been implemented. So really, from a menopause mandate point of view, pushing that to make sure that that is implemented and that all women benefit from that nationally across,
Mhm.
the whole of the country is really important. So I also think, and I know because I'm having conversations with people all the time, there's a lot of investment, big investors, banks, they really see this, now, cynically, they see it as a big growth area where they can make lots of money. But if you look at it not cynically, what you're seeing is you're seeing a lot of founders and banks who are prepared to back women's health products and
Mhm.
women's health innovators. So I think that's extremely positive as well.
Yeah, Tina, I live in US quite a lot of my time, and I notice my insurance company is really proactive. Like every 2 months, I get a letter about a device that could help me monitor one of
Wow.
my specs,
Mm.
or they offer me to send me a free scale that kind of like mm, shows me my weight, but also what do you call it, my kind of like fat percentage of
BMI. Yeah.
BMI, and then or they even I found out I could the app that he used for weight loss.
Yeah.
It was a Noom or something. The insurance can offer me that for free if that's what I want to use. And I was kind of like thinking, but why would they do that? It costs them money to give me these devices or the scale or whatever for free. And then I thought, no, 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 they're not stupid. They're
It's
thinking
preventative. Yeah.
strategically, thinking if we keep her healthy within the right weight, if she's monitoring her women's health, if
Yeah.
she is, following a healthy diet, she's going to be healthy for longer. So long term, she's not going to cost us money needing
Exactly.
medication, whatever.
Exactly.
And I kind
It's
of
good
like thought,
preventative
why
medicine.
doesn't the government think that way?
I
They're just
know.
saying firefight, firefight, firefight. But why don't they think strategically about what can we do to keep the nation healthier by
And it's
like
so
spending to save money?
it's so true. And the old age adage is that that women live longer, but they live longer in ill health.
Mm-hmm.
And and actually, if you ask women what are you afraid of, what do you think is going to kill you, and people always say cancer. And actually, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
In women postmenopausally, what is going to kill you is cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, dementia. And cardiovascular disease, until we're menopausal, we are protected. Our
Yeah.
estrogen gives us cardio protection. Then as soon as we become menopausal, our lipids start to raise. Nobody's explaining this to people. No
Mm-hmm.
one's
Or
talking
you
to them
get this
about
like
it.
fat in the middle and
Exactly. And if you educated women about that, about the need to, if you took their cholesterol all the time and monitored that, then you could make a huge difference
mm-hmm.
in not just women living longer, but the quality of life of women who are often the carers as well. So I think that, again, this comes down to education and people really understanding
Mm-hmm.
what you need to do to look after yourself, in terms of weight bearing exercise for osteoporosis, for example,
Mm-hmm.
how important it is for women to lift weights and really improve their strength, to improve their bone density, and all of those things. Not every woman knows, and we should be told this.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating. I find you can't eat the same food you ate
No,
20 years
no.
ago. You can't do the same. Well, you can do the same exercises, but too much cardiovascular could increase your cortisol, but weight training can actually help to calm things down. So it's like
Exactly. I
education
mean,
is really important.
I can't drink anything now postmenopausally. So because if I drink
Nothing like
one
even
drink,
water, you mean alcohol?
alcohol, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
alcohol. But
yeah,
yeah, if you like alcohol, the tolerance to alcohol, which is really common
yeah.
postmenopausally, that you become intolerant to alcohol. So your body is going through massive changes. And but again, it comes down to lack of education. Everything really that is difficult in life comes down to lack of education, doesn't it?
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. So, Tina, this is such an interesting conversation. But I mean, for anybody listening in who's leading teams or driving transformation or championing change in healthcare, what is one message you would like them to take away from this conversation?
I think for me, the message is about um, creating that passion that you can make a difference, and
Mhm.
that and I've always felt that in pharma. We're not selling double glazing. Not that there's anything wrong with people saying double glazing, but we can make a real difference, and engaging in the wider health discussion like we have in women's health, and not just keeping in pharma and just being all secretive is really important. So I think that passion and belief that you can make a massive difference. And that's what I see in all the women's health companies. I've worked with all the women's health companies on different projects over the years. And without exception, I see all of them that are so passionate and feel that they really want to make a difference for women. And I think that's incredibly important in any type of transformation and change, really.
And it's a big quote. I think if you think you can, or if you think
Yeah.
you can't, you either way you're right. So I think believe in what you're doing and
Yeah,
making a
absolutely.
difference
Absolutely.
has a big
Yeah.
impact on the outcome. Thank you for
Yeah.
that top tip.
That's okay.
Before we wrap up, Tina, I usually ask this to all my amazing guests. I just wonder, have you had a chance to dip into the Omni Advantage? And if you have, was there a chapter or an idea that resonated with you or stood out for you?
Yeah, and I have. And again, it comes back to what we were just talking about, really, about how important the people are in this.
Mhm.
And, that to have any type of transformation, you've got to have people's hearts and minds to do that. And, that things can't be done to people, but they've got to come along on the journey, like we talked about with technology. And I think, that's we really see that now when we talk about menopause in the workplace and people having workplace action plans. It's not just a tick box.
Mhm.
People, we want people's hearts to make a change, to really lead this transformation. And I think you make that point really well in the book, that digital doesn't replace people. People still need to be at the heart and soul of things. And I think that is what struck me in the book very much.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. I think people are the key element that would unleash the potential in whatever
Yes,
you're doing. And if you don't take them on that journey, then investment in tech is just futile, really. People
yeah,
make it to
absolutely.
life. Yeah, definitely. I was going to say thank you so much, Tina. It's
That's
been a
okay.
real
Before I go,
pleasure.
can I just say one thing, minutes?
Of
Can
course,
I
of
just
course.
say at the moment we've got our big menopause mandate survey out, which if you go on the menopause mandate website, you'll see the link to that. And it's the biggest survey we have of any menopausal data. And at the moment, we've only launched it for a month and we're already at 20,000 women. We'd really like to get that up to 30,000 women. And we'd really like more diversity in women. That so if you can share it in your networks, because what we want to do is present that data to the Secretary of State to really push on these ideas as well. So if people could really go and have a go at finding that survey and then sharing it widely with their networks, I'd be really grateful.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. And maybe what I suggest you do, Tina, put it in the chat underneath, not here,
Yes,
but on the LinkedIn.
in the
And
LinkedIn.
then we would
Okay.
divert people to it. And I'll probably do a post about it to
Brilliant.
make
Thank
sure
you.
I'll share it in my network. It's been a real pleasure having you with us.
Thank you so much. It's been really great. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, I love your openness and the way you share your perspective. You keep it real. I love that. And
Thank
thank
you.
you for anybody who listened in or tuned in, or anybody who's going to, and if you felt like contributing, that would have been welcome. But I hope you got value from this. I think for me, if there was a one key takeaway from today is improving women's health isn't responsibility of one organization or one sector. It takes all of us to really listen in more closely and work together and keep that challenging the status quo, because if we don't challenge it, it just will stay the same. And maybe Tina's given us a challenge and opportunity to take part in the survey and share our feedback and share it with our network. So thank you so much for tuning
Thank
in,
you.
and thank you, Tina, for joining. And
Thank you, Minez.
yeah, until next time, and
Thank
another
you.
conversation. Thank you. Cheers.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.